Hello and welcome to this fabulous Monday evening. We're glad you joined us on Power and Perspective. I am April, and this is Aaron.
So disappointing.
This is Aaron, and we are here to reframe conversations with empathy and humor.
To the best of our ability today, because it's a heavy one.
It is a heavy one today. I guess
we don't talk
sometimes
about violence a lot.
Humor may not be appropriate at sometimes, huh? At some point.
No, I think it's always appropriate. I think it helps.
That's a good question.
Helps digest.
I wish we could put a poll.
Subjects.
Like, is humor always appropriate?
I think you just did.
Oh. I can't make the screen smaller. Ah!
This is the informal poll. Can we get ones in chat for if humor is always appropriate?
What did I smile about? Ah!
Thinking you might get the intro wrong. The point.
Oh. That's because I keep thinking he's going to trick me one day and turn it around. Well, Jacob says, yes, humor's always appropriate, so.
I gain nothing. I gain nothing from screwing with you.
Really?
In the moment, I really gain nothing from screwing with you. If it's unintentional, it's hilarious.
Oh,
if it's forced, it becomes not funny.
Not funny. Oh, that may be like.
It's like the reason I don't watch Jimmy Fallon, which is a controversial. This is the most controversial thing I'll say right tonight.
Yes, agreed. And I don't think Willie's watching right now, but I told him that you didn't like Jimmy Fallon, and he was horrified as I am. He was horrified. I was like, thank you for that camaraderie. I appreciate it.
I mean, if you're Jimmy Fallon, it's got to be a good life to live, because there's always somebody that thinks you're hilarious.
I know.
And he's just in the other room in the mirror.
He laughs at himself. We have to tell why. Aaron doesn't like Jimmy Fallon because Jimmy Fallon laughs at his own jokes.
It's the same reason the people that don't like Jimmy Fallon don't like Jimmy Fallon. Like, there's only two camps. It's Jimmy Fallon is funny, and then Jimmy Fallon thinks he's funny. Like, those are the two camps.
Well, can I be in both camps? I would like to be in both camps.
No, because if you think that just Jimmy Fallon thinks he's funny, that means you don't think he's funny.
But no, I think he's funny, and I think he thinks he's funny.
Yeah, but that he thinks he's funny because he's objectively funny, or he thinks he's funny because he thinks he's funny. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, but I
This is
also think
getting
I
out
could
of
be in
hand.
both camps.
No.
We could do a whole episode on.
Yeah, let's not. Let's get started on the shit that we don't want to talk about.
A half the episode singing Irish songs, I was gonna say folk songs. I don't know if that's the right word. Half a song sing Irish songs, and then half an episode talking about Jimmy Fallon.
Oh, we figured out that won't work. By the way, we can't do a thing over Skype.
What
We
thing?
can't do a call and response song over Skype because of the delay. That yeah, we'd
sucks.
have to do it on TikTok, and then or with the tools on TikTok, and then air it at the beginning of our show. Which I mean, that could be fun too if I can figure out TikTok.
And then we'd respond to our own thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, if we want to be just inside of our own asses on a topic there.
Yes.
So let's before this gets completely off the rails.
Thank you, Katie. Yes, Team Jimmy.
It needs to be prefaced that we still, as we say in so many episodes, we are white people that live in Las Vegas and we're born and raised in Las Vegas, and we have geographical and racial biases that will be inevitable. But I guess, I mean, 8 people were shot in Atlanta in massage parlors, right? I mean, that we can't get around having happened.
I have a question. Once you said that, we're like, how often is it that like groups of 4 or more are shot? I know it's a weird question.
I don't think it's a weird question.
Like, does it happen not very often at all? And that's why we hear about all of them? It seems like it'd be something that happens a lot, but maybe I'm just pessimistic and think people shoot people everywhere.
Yeah, I think there might be a bit of cynicism in that, but I also think that there's an issue with the media reporting and actually providing information if it can't be agendized. Which is, I mean, I'm not taking a position one side or the other on that because whatever, they feel they have a job to do, and I personally, I am so biased against them that no matter what I say, it's basically meaningless as far as a rational debate goes.
That's true. Well, I mean, I see the importance of the news. Is Jimmy Fallon part Asian? Are you trying to relate our intro to the topic? Because you can't.
Get more ADD, bro.
I just wonder, like, if groups of people die, like, if you're the media, I guess you would share any large group of a large shooting like that. It would be media worthy, right?
I don't know. As somebody who doesn't consume traditional media, I don't understand its general purpose. I don't understand what I have to gain from knowing about it necessarily.
I think somebody shared like facts like off the fly. Jacob's
it's from UC Davis. This actually terrifies me. So I'll let you do that.
It said there were approximately 40,000 deaths from firearms in the U.S. in 2018. 61% of deaths from firearms. 61% are deaths of suicide. Wow. 24,000 people in the U.S. died by firearm suicide. Firearms are the means in approximately half of suicides nationwide. Wow.
No, that's just efficiency numbers. That's not.
Oh, homicide accounts for 35% of total deaths firearms. They were the means for about 74% of homicides in 2018. Oh, that must be worldwide versus.
Well, and there's a lot of breakdown to do in there. How much of it is localized to dense urban populations? I'm guessing most of it.
Yeah.
I think generally move out of cities would be how you avoid anything bad
happening to you.
Yeah. Or in general. I mean, you avoid traffic, so you take out the car accident things. A lot of cities are on the coast, so you avoid shark attacks. Let's not get into that.
Tsunamis.
Let's just move. Yeah. No, we don't live in tsunami. We're going to move past that very quickly.
Inside joke.
Yeah. Yes, cities do suck.
It's a higher proportion of people in a concentrated area.
Yeah, which is
So,
going to be bad because spoiler alert, and this is all of my cynicism coming out right now. Get it all out up front. People fucking suck.
I was just gonna say that, but also I have hope. There's like a glimmer, like a little fairy, like. But it proves people suck, right? I mean, that's like a social experiment that just proves people suck. When there are more people, more suckier things happen.
Yeah, it's a numbers game.
Yeah.
It's just a numbers game. There's more competition for resources, and people respond to those sorts of things differently. Which I mean is part of when we start talking about sex work and communities of poverty. That you know when you're trying to make ends meet, you will do it by any means necessary. And if the only ends that you feel are available to you are crime, then you commit crime.
Yeah.
No,
That made me
no
think of
necessary stigma, but
people who steal Amazon. I know I've said this before on here. People who steal Amazon packages off of porches are the lowest kind of people. Well, and people who shoot a bunch of people too, those people are bad. But I mean, like,
like breaking into people's houses.
I don't know why I feel stealing the packages are just because when you break into their house, you know what you're stealing. When you're stealing off the porch, you could be stealing like literal life saving medicine.
Well, and to be
You
fair,
could
if there's a drug addict breaking into your house, they'll probably steal the same medicine.
like they wouldn't steal like insulin.
They might. They probably wouldn't
Would
know. If
they?
they're there for drugs, they may not know what they're looking at and just grab and run.
Yeah, you just steal randomly off a porch, like randomly.
I don't
It
know.
could be.
I think there's a certain amount of psychological torture that happens after a break-in where you don't feel secure in your own home, which is the place that you should theoretically feel the most secure. So
Yes.
crime happening in your home, which I guess extends a little bit to the porch in this instance, would be the worst kind of crime, other than
Yeah, because
just outright killing, which
yeah,
we
what are you gonna do with
don't
it if you don't
support.
like
In
it?
case it need to be said.
No. Oh yeah, we don't. We do not support stealing off porches, nor do we support killing people.
So why did he do it?
He says he was sexually frustrated. No, he's sexual. No, no, no. He had a sexual addiction, and these types of places like feed into his sexual addiction. And these places happened, or at least one of them, I guess, happened to be a place that had been investigated for what I would
Prostitution.
refer to as happy endings.
And I think it's worse than that. Um, yes, I think I agree, Katrina. The resource theory can support racial inequality. There's a lot there, especially based on the history of our nation in general. So let's be clear here. Like I saw some articles that were dismissing the idea of sexual addiction as not recognized by the medical community and all that. I don't care. People with addictions, even if it's self-perceived addictions, should be met with empathy, right? Up
Yeah.
until the point that you commit violence in
Up
any
until
way.
the point that it harms someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I don't care if it's a legitimate perceived addiction. It's exactly the same. That as long as it's in your house, it doesn't really hurt anybody. But if you're committing, if you're aggressing against someone else, then it's definitely an issue.
Yeah.
And to that point, I guess, I was reading an article that was quoting a study that was done by Barbara Brentz, who is a sociology professor here in good old UNLV, talking about, and I just lost it. Oh, no.
We have lost. Stephen asked if that place was participating in human trafficking. Do we know that?
I'm not sure if that's possible to know at this point. It may come out. But I think generally speaking, it's more likely if they were victims of police stings.
Stings.
Yeah. Who spoke to more than 100 Chinese and Korean workers at illicit massage parlors for a 2019 study found that while some women did say they felt deceived or coerced into jobs that involve sex work, many chose the profession. Oh, this isn't the one I was looking for, but I'll finish it here.
Oh.
After having bad experiences and few other types of generally low-paying jobs available to them, like restaurants and nail salons. So what I was looking for was, oh, here it is. There were some reports. An alarming 40% of women told researchers, I'm just, holy crap, what happened to my notes?
Tragedy.
My copy pastes got all over the place. So 40% of women were coerced into sex acts in massage parlors was what that was. And
That's a super high number.
it is an incredibly high number.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. I could see that, especially, oh, and that's super stereotypical of me to say, but I feel like the Asian community, the Asian female community is very demure, and the Asian culture is very male dominated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if I'm
White
allowed to
people,
say
Las
that
Vegas,
or
it's
like,
fine. You're good.
oh,
We gave our what's it called?
oh, we perspective angle.
The disclaimer at the top.
Oh, yes. Don't forget that we are white.
And born
Maybe
and
we
raised
should
in
keep
Las
it.
Vegas because we see a lot of
Yeah.
we have a lot of massage parlors here, and I mean there's so much that's crazy about Vegas in particular, and there's a lot of Asian men who are heavy participants, Asian businessmen, from what I understand, that are participants in our strip club communities and stuff that end up here for conferences and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And that there are people that make their yearly wage, in a week while these conferences are in town.
They cater to the Asian
Yeah.
community, the visiting Asian
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of our casinos do as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, it's like a whole thing. Um,
So it's like the bias that we have is so weird because
yeah.
it's
And I was
so
talking to
individual and isolated.
Willie too, and we talk about race things a lot. And like growing up in Vegas is different too because it's pretty diverse and I think pretty accepting. I feel like I grew up in a pretty diverse community, comparatively so, I guess.
I guess I have no context, but I mean generally speaking, I don't care. Like I judge situations and people by and one thing I will say that will probably be held against me at some point during some of our conversations is that I do stick to statistical correlations and things of that nature. So when we talk about the majority of massage parlors of questionable nature in Las Vegas being, or at least having Asian names, I can't speak to the people who run them. They may very well also be run by old white men who have
Who
their hands in
employ
human
Asian.
trafficking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there being
Well, I
a
know-
whole connection between that kind of community existing and also using that as an advantage to make money, because if that wasn't there, if that market wasn't there, these places wouldn't exist. And then going back to the other quote about them leaving restaurants and nail salons, if that would be an issue as well. There's so much shit to unpack.
Yeah, because the underlying poverty drives them to it. And it's when we were talking about if this shooting was racially motivated, and then I was thinking like, okay, no, he said this was a sex addiction, like that, and these are the places that were kind of like feeding his sex addiction. Oh, hi, cat. I wish you could see it. He's just saying like, excuse me, pay attention to me, excuse me. um, and these types of places were feeding it, and they are predominantly the Asian community. But if you told me, hey, find me a massage parlor with a happy ending, I mean, I would look at the Asian massage parlors.
I'm
You know what I
disappointed. I'm
mean? So
disappointed
like,
that you don't specifically know where to go.
what?
Nothing.
No,
Let's
I
move
do
on.
not.
Let's move on from that.
I do not specifically know where to go. But what I'm saying is, does that make it racially motivated? Because you know what I mean? Like, of course, these are the parlors that he was looking at. It's what I would think, but I'm not. It has nothing to do with the fact that they're Asian. Just as that's the stigma that's given, right?
Yeah, like it like a self selected sample, so to speak. As dangerous as that is to say, and I don't think that should be the case. I just think that as we stand right now, that it is. I think any stats on sex work are probably inaccurate. I partially agree. It
Yeah,
depends on what
partially.
your bias is looking into sources for those statistics. Because I personally am pro legalization, very aggressively pro legalization. Mostly because I think law enforcement has a large hand in creating part of the problem as well, as far as not being able to report. And if you report,
Yeah,
and just like we were talking about, like if they say that they're helping, right, with human trafficking, if we're talking about sex work and human trafficking, helping those people is arresting them from a law
yeah,
enforcement perspective. And is that right?
exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not. Is it helpful?
It's not
No.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and if it was legalized, I think of legalizing, legalizing like certain drugs and stuff like that. The theory behind that is it becomes a cleaner industry. Like here in Nye County, prostitution is legal. And do they like to be? That's not how they are referred to. Like, what is their PC job title?
I don't know. If it's not sex
I don't.
workers, I got nothing.
Yeah. So anyway, the brothels, the women who work in the brothels are then it like people are tested and like there's like requirements and does OSHA go there? They
Yeah,
have to, right?
just to check their ladders and their
and
scaffolding based on my experience.
and their plugs
Yeah.
and their plugs. That's what we always got in trouble for at schools, not at
I
brothels.
think
That's the
I would say probably not. I would say that the community probably has a means. Like the industry regulates itself more than the government does, and the
oh.
government is
Oh,
there.
really?
I would say probably yeah, because
Oh,
that becomes the nature of competition. Is that if you have that like those security measures in place, you become more attractive to patrons.
got
So
it.
there's when it's legal, the community has more incentive to police itself through all that.
Yeah.
IRL sad endings. Welcome to my life. Not in the way that you meant, but just
Okay, there's so much happening in the chat. I'll go back up to Mary's. And we had talked about this before the show about the fetishization of, um, she says non-white as exotic or tempting, but I think there's a large proportion of that of the Asian community. The golly bolly, fetishization, is that a word?
fetishizing. Fetish
Fetishizing
is
of the,
easier. I think the word that you're trying to say is fine, but your tongue
yeah.
doesn't agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like of the Asian community is like is a pretty big thing too. So does that therefore then feed into these happy endings? Is this happy ending like why is it Asian
That's what I was.
massage parlors?
Honestly, I fought to figure that out, and basically, what I always come to is that it's a self-selected sample that they get into it because it's the way that they respond to the way that they have responded to
Poverty.
poverty, probably based on American culture and that fetishization.
So if I was to go to I mean I've never been to Asia. So like if I was going to go to Asia and go to different countries, do you think things like this would be more predominant there versus other cultures? Like, is this something that happens in their culture as a whole, or just when they come over here and experience poverty?
That's a reasonable question that I certainly don't have an answer to.
Come on.
I don't know. I don't know if sex work is more common, or where in the world sex work might be more common, or uh, if it's our economic superiority theoretically that
Yeah.
and the money that we have to spend that causes,
Okay.
because you have to be
And the
willing to pay for it,
disparity of
which means the money has to
classes,
be there.
maybe.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's a really complicated question.
I imagine that there's a large class disparity in Asia too. I don't know why I imagine that. That also may be ignorant to say.
Well, and also
Yeah, someone.
to Mary's point, I think sex work is untreated universal where there's female poverty, and it seems like also that what I know about, I'm not gonna go there right now, Jake, but but also there are Western tourism as well, could be a factor in considering that when you talk about Southeast Asia. I know there are stereotypes as far as visiting Southeast Asia
Yeah, so
that
that's a
contribute to
true
that.
point.
Yeah.
So if there is a high proportion in these Asian countries, yeah, who are their customers? Is it the local community or is it the Western visitors?
Yeah.
Interesting. Um, yeah, Stephen, we never get any tax money from that bull hockey. Yeah, Stephen saying the tax funds fuel our school because that's where the marijuana money was supposed to go for Nevada. Instead, it went into a rainy day fund, and now I have no idea
And I
from
don't know
there.
if you've ever been to, I know you've been to Vegas, Stephen, but it doesn't rain here. So that
Yeah,
money
they're like,
just sits still.
it's a rainy day fund. Oh,
So
where's
okay, so I mean, sex work aside, I think it's important to note that, and this is getting kind of off the topic of the Atlanta shooting, because I think that isolated incidents of violence are not helpful. Like, no matter what comes of that, it's not going to be helpful to anybody except maybe as a rallying cry. But so when I started looking into this, immediately after that happened, there were reports of violence in San Francisco. So I started looking into it, and it turned out that between March 19th, and this is, I'm quoting a project based out of the San Francisco State University, between March 19th, 2020 and February 28th, 2021, there were at least 3,795 incidents of anti-Asian hate across the nation, ranging from physical assault and verbal harassment to various civil rights violations. According to the report, more than 700 of those incidents occurred in the Bay Area.
I need percentages. These numbers mean nothing.
Just under a quarter.
Okay, so a large proportion
Yes,
happened
a
in.
significant number happened in the Bay Area, which is interesting to find out because of the perceived inclusivity ideals of the Bay Area as a whole. Yeah, I was
Yeah, that is.
interested to
Oh,
find that
that's a
out.
good point. Stephen makes a good point. Doesn't San Francisco have a much higher percent of Asians than Atlanta?
And we were talking about that. We were talking about that before we came on, and self-isolation of communities and stuff. I mean, almost certainly. Yeah, almost. I mean,
Yeah.
almost certainly.
But not. Do you think they have the highest? Because that wasn't that a comparison of the country to San Francisco?
Yes. Yeah. So that would
So
say that just
is it-
under. I definitely would not say that just under a quarter of the Asian population is in the Bay Area.
live in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So it is a higher percentage than other places. But when you mention like California and the Asian community, the first thing that comes to my mind is the history of the oppression of Asians, like over history, that I feel is largely ignored. Like when we talk about history that's not taught, like this history is not taught. Like that Asians were in encampments and things like this, and that a large portion of them were in California for some reason. Why is that?
Why is it not taught?
Oh, why back a long time ago were a large proportion of Asians in California?
Oh, I would guess logistical reasons. Same reason that Europeans ended up in the Eastern Seaboard.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I
I mean
accept that.
just from a practical starting point there.
Yes, that makes
Um,
sense. Okay.
and I
But
don't
yeah,
think that
like
that's like as relevant now, but those insular communities were created during those
in that
times. Yeah.
yeah. So maybe I just think I wonder if like that happens to be related as well. And the hate, like, so we talk about the hate of the South because that's where slavery was heavy and stuff like that, right? And that hate has lasted and been passed down generation to generation. So I can imagine the same thing, although California is much more transient than the South. Um, I can imagine though that like if like that hate might have been passed down to those generations as well.
And it's interesting that you bring that up. I was thinking about while I was trying to sleep earlier today at like noon, when I sleep, that being from the Southwest, I think that we experience, not like us personally, but as a community, we experience more or a disproportionate amount of prejudice toward uh, Latin Americans or the Latinx community, or fuck, I don't know what to call anybody anymore. Because I don't think it's important,
Specifically
but
Mexicans
yeah,
because that's we're
specifically,
by the
yeah,
border.
yeah, because we're by the border, and as you go through this, I guess that would not justify but explain the San Francisco situation, just because of the amount of exposure
Oh,
that
that
there
makes
is.
sense.
So the
That makes sense.
percentage of so yeah to well, I don't want to give Jake any credit for dropping facts because it's not helpful. We don't need facts here. 33% Asian
I
in
appreciate it,
San
Jacob.
Francisco versus Atlanta, which is 5.1%.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so he went way out of his way.
Thank you, Jacob. Wow,
He
that's
went way out of his
amazing.
way.
Interesting. And Stephen makes a good point as well that we should film the pre-show. Stephen, I always say we should have like a little filming of our pre-show and post-show because we're also very hilarious in our post-show. Like it would be entertaining for
This is
people
why we need a Discord for the three people, 8 people that want to
that
participate in
want
that.
it.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, and racism and
Oh,
regional, yeah, and I think that's an important point, especially when we talk about like trying to and I'm trying to mince my words here a little bit, trying to bring things to light, and you have movements like BLM being separate from the now AAPI violence movement, that these are people that are starting it for their group, and I would generally say a majority of people don't show up for whatever others group thing, that they want people to show up for theirs, and people do. Like there are groups of people that do show up and are universal in all of the support, but really a lot of this is shit that we should just be marching in the streets about constantly, right?
and that's what I go back and forth between because like they're like the first thing that comes out like is was about the race, like the racial issue. Like the first thing that comes out, but I, to me, and then it came out later that he said it wasn't racially motivated, and then people are like, "Well, I questioned that because he like he was a sex addict, so we can't trust him," and blah blah blah. It just feels more separating, like it, like forcing things to be a racial issue feels more separating. And again, I'm white.
Yeah, it's important to know.
This is the perspective I have. It very well could be the wrong and even a harmful perspective, but to me it feels like all of this is more dividing when like hate is hate. I saw a lady on Instagram. It was on somebody's post, and then I couldn't find it again when I wanted to tell the story. But she was like, why are we even talking about if it's raci- racially motivated? Um, Anytime a white man commits aggression against anyone, it's racially motivated. And I was like, that that doesn't doesn't seem right. But like, let's say I went to disagree with her, I would be obviously like condemned.
Yeah.
But I just don't see how it's helpful. I just don't see. I, I guess it's to point out that there are these disparities, which I 100% agree. Let me just point that out. 100%. There are disparities. 100% there's racism. 100% there is, I don't know the right way to say, but white supremacy. 100%. Totally agree with all that. But to force everything to be based on this seems dividing.
It does. I agree. And it creates those, and we're not talking about for us. We're not talking about for the people that live now. When I have that, like, when I have that thought process and I'm going down that hole, is we're talking about, if you look at the history of our nation, we're talking about 100 years in the future. Like, what do we want it to be 100 years in the future?
About.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do
That's
we
like,
how do
it
we
reminds
start that now?
when you think about when you do inner work and you think about your thoughts and the different parts of you, right? You think about who you want to be and you change your mindset to represent that, right?
Yeah.
So this is just like that same work but on a larger scale. Who do we want to be? We want to be someone who is, we're just anti-hate.
Yeah.
And I'm white and I've been, trust me, I can hear y'all yelling at me and like, I don't know, I haven't checked the chat, but I get that that is a point of privilege that I'm coming from. I get that. I I, I am 100% about stopping like racial divide and things like that. Like 100%. I just don't think this is the right way.
I don't disagree. I'm not going to disagree with you.
You're also white.
Yeah. I mean, it's not helpful.
It's
We're
not
not really helping anybody. We're doing this because we want to. So to Mary's point, Asians are always pitted against each other communities because we treat them as model minorities. And I was looking into that, and one of the things that I came across was a point that in an article that Asian Americans are the most economically divided racial group in the country and make up a very large proportion of low-wage service workers, going back to restaurants and nail salons and such. And that, there are probably a significantly higher percentage of Asians that are economically prosperous, and entire communities, like in Vegas, the whole west side, not the whole west side, like central west side, has a very large affluent Asian community.
Yeah.
That is very apparent.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
we lived over there for a little bit, way back in the day.
Well, Sage goes to school up there. She calls herself. Well, I don't want to call her out on.
Yeah, let's move on from that.
They
rapidly.
told her. Okay, she goes to a school that is where an IB school, International Baccalaureate Program, where there are a high number of Asian students who have told her that she is an honorary Asian.
Well, you did it. Here we are.
I know. Well, I did. I had to do it because that's what happened. Uh, Katie way back said a good point too, that Hollywood pushes this divide or this. I think she was talking about the fetishization of.
There you go.
Whatever. Of the Asian community, and that there were some shows on Netflix and a show about Asian women who were sold for sex and things like that.
I mean, Hollywood profits from a lot of pretty disgusting shit. So, I mean,
yeah,
that's like police engaging in poor behavior. I'm like, all right, it's another Monday. I don't know.
Yeah.
What you want.
There's so many good points here. So Jacob says we grew up in a much more diverse area, yes, than most of the U.S.
Oh, yes, and I disproportionately, as history goes, the most diverse, the most accepting, and the most prosperous. And I'm an American defender here in this one, which is weird as a general anarchist, but it is like the reality of it is that most other places.
Oh, you mean the U.S. in general?
Yeah, is more prosperous and more diverse and more accepting, and that
than other countries in
yeah,
general.
yes, in general, yeah.
He was talking about Las Vegas, which even
Oh
of
well, Las Vegas almost doesn't count for anything because Las Vegas doesn't have a population.
well, and it's also Las Vegas is 100% focus is money.
Yeah, that is
We
true.
don't care.
That is true.
We don't care who you are, what color you are, like how much money you make, like whatever. We just want your money.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
Yep.
So welcome all.
Yeah.
Welcome all.
Yeah. And TC government loves all the divide. It's help with votes. Yeah. Yeah. It's easier to build one wall than any other thing, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, Mary says that she grew up in New Mexico where there's a lot of racism against Native Americans.
Oh yeah, and I've watched a lot of things in Canada where they were talking about racism against the First Nation, which is the native Inuit community, and I'm not going to say anything that's inclusive here because I'm ignorant, and
In that
but
regard, because
so
we're
it's
not
I mean
taught.
it's not yeah, which is I mean just to say that it's the idea of it is universal and human, and that's what we have to focus on breaking. And
Yes.
and focusing on isolated incidents. When I see somebody shot up Asian massage parlors in Atlanta, I see shot, and then I move on with my life. As soon as you commit aggression, your motivations no longer mean anything to me. I mean, as far as from a moving forward standpoint, I think it's important for law enforcement to know. Theoretically, this is getting off of my like morality wheel here, but as far as knowing what to look for and knowing that these things are happening is important. But from but from a personal standpoint, it's like, all right, he committed violence, and if as far as the judicial branch of our wonderful government goes, that I don't know that hate crimes should be punished more aggressively, because I don't understand the
because
justification.
It's all hate. Like that's what I don't understand why we call it hate crimes, because I don't go I don't go shoot people, but nobody's going to shoot people in love. No one's like, oh, I love you so much, let me shoot you.
Yeah.
No, it's all hate.
Yeah, except Dr. Kevorkian. Let's just be clear.
I don't know.
Assisted
suicide.
suicide.
Because he kills people for love. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, but if anybody shoots anybody, that's hate. Okay, that's hate. But to your point, Monique makes a good point and says that where she lived, there was an active shooter shooting specifically Latinos, and that was like scary to think of. So that's a good point. So if I knew that there was a bunch of hate crime, and if there was going to be repeat offenders, which also goes back to my point, making this a thing about shooting the Asian community and putting it out there in the media, isn't that making everything more scary? Isn't that like a risk of copycatters?
I think I agree, yeah.
Isn't that amping up the tension?
Well, and it's so when I've talked with people about the language that politicians use and how it incites violence against communities. And what you see is the same thing in the news. We just treat it differently because it's a factual analysis, theoretically. Is that if you see someone across the country go, oh, I'm not the only one who hates Asians and feels okay to shoot them, do you not feel empowered to do the same? So how much good versus harm, if we did a cost benefit analysis there, would there be?
Motivated by a certain sect of people, not just even racially.
Yeah, anything.
But like if they said people were out killing sex workers. Yeah, like.
And it, like Mary said, it only appears isolated because it made the news. It's always been happening. Just making I agree. It's always happening. These sorts of things are always happening and need to be looked at by people who have the time and energy to look at them. And the news is not the way you get the information.
Well, the people are law enforcement that
theoretically I would say activist groups more than law enforcement, but I may be agendized.
Do they have the resources?
Oh, they almost certainly do, and they do. I mean,
Uh,
we've seen.
I mean, the resources to like they can't go interview prisoners. I
What do
guess
you
it
mean?
could
Yeah,
if they were shooting like a documentary or something.
yeah. I mean,
Oh, anyway, Mary, that's why I was wondering if like large shootings happen that we don't hear of, and like why we hear about the certain ones we hear of, because it just feels like they share what can be sensationalized,
yeah,
what can be, what can, it feels like they share what can divide us.
yeah,
Like that almost seems like the goal
yep,
is division. Um, a- and if you don't think it's division, right? Think about even just sharing this and then somebody saying, wow, I don't think this is racially motivated. And you're like, what? You're such a horrible person. Boom, division.
yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Even more division, even more division.
Well, yeah, and we never. I don't think we ever talked about the Coca Cola thing, and their Be Less White. They had a training thing where part of it was
Oh, yeah.
Be Less White. It came and went very quickly because it was completely asinine, the whole thing. But it's the sort of language that, I mean, is the issue.
Yeah. Regardless of what side it's on, like, I don't know. But again, it's because we're white. Like, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yep.
We don't get to like have an opinion, which I totally understand because I haven't lived under a racial bias.
Yeah.
You know what I
I'm
mean?
happy to accept my ignorance and still have a conversation about it.
Exactly. And also, I don't think just because you are of a certain ethnic group, you are automatically therefore right about how things can influence society at large.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't your race does not give you like a totem regardless of your race, white or black, or regardless of your race doesn't just give you an automatic like you know all and end all, you're the end all be all of the knowledge of how things should affect society.
Yeah. I agree. And I mean, and it's important in that vein, like of us being white Las Vegans, which I will not let go of, is Las Vegan being a very specific demographic of people that should be ignored.
As you
They
should not. You should not drop that.
because yeah, I mean we live in isolated ignorance in a lot of ways as far as stuff like that goes, just because of the nature of Las
Of our
Vegas.
city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a guy, Lung. God damn it. I'm gonna move on from his name. Who in San Francisco, who, at the beginning of the pandemic, who started the San Francisco Peace Collective to patrol Chinatown to help protect older people and women who were being attacked. Though many talk about the hate in terms of the pandemic and the anti-Asian rhetoric of Kung Flu and China virus, Lung said the violence had begun well before March 2020. And this was like really heavy. What he said here. I'm just tired. I'm tired of having to prove that we face discrimination. I'm tired of having to prove that we belong. I'm tired of having to prove that we're allies. I'm tired of having to apologize for speaking up. I'm tired of being gaslighted. I'm tired of the victim blaming of the oppression Olympics. I'm tired of thinking of others while nobody else is thinking of us. I'm tired of having to internalize the pain. I'm just so tired.
And I think that that could be said of a lot of different communities across history.
Yeah.
Like oh my gosh, like the Muslim community after 9/11 attacks. You know what I mean? And if you're, what, what is it called on your head? The,
There's a lot of head coverings. I mean, are you looking for turban? Because I think
is
that
it
might
turban?
be.
Is
I
that the
think that
right
might.
word?
We'll just go with head coverings.
Okay. Yeah.
Religious
So if
head
you, oh,
coverings.
yes, yes, I'm going to do that. So if you get on the plane with a religious head covering, like after 9/11, imagine the prejudice and the trauma, you know?
Yeah. Well, Sikh is a religion, right? That doesn't is not a reference to the head covering itself.
Oh, it could
Anyway,
be,
it's
I
yeah.
think it's religion. What's liquid caffeine plug?
Oh, liquid caffeine is a wonderful product brought to you by me here. This is what I use to get by. I put it in my water.
What is that? Is
It's
that a pump?
yeah, it's a shampoo bottle essentially, but it's yeah, it's my liquid
Oh my!
caffeine.
And how?
Thanks
Like,
for
what percent is it?
think.
Stuff.
One pump is 8 milligrams, so like theoretically a cup of coffee.
We should get them to sponsor us now.
I mean, I'm in. If it gets me free products, I'm not gonna complain at all. Uh,
Oh, she's disagreeing with my term Muslims. Yes,
oh, fair
sure.
enough. Yeah,
I
and that's
absolutely.
that's a fair, that's
Yeah, that's why
totally fair
I
assessment.
moved to religious head covering
Yeah, that's
because I didn't know the right word to say. But my point, I hope, got through my using of the wrong word. I hope my point got across.
yeah.
Which I sometimes feel is a little more important than the right terminology.
And
But
go ahead. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna go back up to her, reckon with our white supremacy problem, and I think that that is an issue that is 100% a thing that needs to be addressed. But again, I don't think it's being addressed in the proper way.
The way we're doing it
You
is
know
not
what I
correct. Yeah, it's not helpful.
and it's not helpful. Yeah, not the right way. Not to say there's a right way and a wrong way. I just don't see it doing a lot of good.
Yeah.
Because it 100% needs to be addressed, and it's 100% something that people aren't seeing.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's people who don't see it and don't understand it. Which granted, it's hard to see something that you're not seeing from any different perspective than your own.
Yeah. Well,
Like
and
the
also,
blind-
I mean, it speaks back to 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the Gina Carano situation. Is that if you try to meet ignorance with aggression or hate, that it's not progress. That will not create
Yeah.
progress. So if there's an ignorant white person in your life, and instead of having a conversation with them, you find yourself shouting them down, you are not doing you're not accomplishing what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, nobody's gonna change their mind. You're not gonna. To me, like when they talk, especially when they talk about like the racist cops or something like that. You're not gonna change a racist cop's mind. They're 100% are racist cops. They're also 100% fantastic cops who are out to just help people. But you're not gonna change the racist cop's mind by spitting in faces or by like looting stores. Like that doesn't seem like the path to change I'm talking about the deep racist. Like you'll affect maybe other people, but how do you change a racist mind? You know what I mean? Like
Time.
that needs to be addressed.
It's a generational thing. I would
think
argue
it's time and exposure.
Yeah.
And exposure.
Yeah. Well, and I think
Like-
the point of exposure speaks against exactly how we handle things.
Agreed. It causes division. It
Yeah.
causes me, the person who you want to educate, right? In theory.
Yeah.
Right. I'm white. I don't know. Is there anything? I don't know. If there's anything else against.
You're middle class.
Yes.
Um.
I'm white. I'm middle class.
I mean, you live in
wanna
Las
educate-
Vegas, so you're not really a victim of a lot of police stuff.
Yeah. I'm also adorable. So there's that.
Oh, well, I don't have that
I don't
problem, and I don't have any more bad interactions than you do.
Anyways, like the way to educate is to expose and to show different perspectives, not to like constantly tell someone that their viewpoint is irrelevant
Yeah.
because you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know the right way to say it.
Well, and to address Mary's point, white people need to confront other white people. It's not up to minorities to educate us better. There is no us. It's up to everybody. And if you say that and like a person only has minority friends, that means they'll never be educated if that's really the position. People can only be swayed by people that they respect and care about. So it's those people in whatever situation it is that need to be having those conversations. It's not about white people convincing other white people not to be racist, because it's just not the way it's going to happen inevitably.
And it's like saying, like, let's say I'm Christian. Like, let's imagine, especially this might be something that you can relate to, like someone trying to convince you of their religion, right? So if I'm racist, that's deep-seated belief, right? Like that's as deep-seated as a religion may be. And you're trying to convince me of your religion versus my religion. Do you think that coming at me and like, no, the best way to convince me of your religion is to show me,
Yeah.
is to just be, is to be who you think you should be. And that goes back to the most important person to heal before you can heal anyone else is to heal yourself. So if you do more self work, naturally the people who you're around are going to be affected by that. So before you call out other people,
Well, you have to be
look at
careful with
yourself.
that, especially if self work involves eliminating temptation through violence.
Well,
Not to laugh at the situation, just yeah, I'm not.
clearly that is not what it means. No, we do not eliminate temptation through violence.
No, you don't commit violence. That's it. Honestly, and this is probably going to be a unpopular opinion, but a quiet, lonely racist does no one any harm. If there's a racist who lives in his basement and is an agoraphobe as well, I mean, the racism isn't the issue. Violence and hate are like outward, not inward, are the fundamental
Yeah.
issue. Like if you're afraid, like if I was afraid of Latinos, I probably wouldn't leave the house, right? And no one would be impacted by that if that were the case. So we have to focus on what it is, and it's the aggression. And I don't know how to do that. I'm not saying I know how to do that, but we have to be careful when we're having these conversations to understand that it. I don't want to say that racism isn't evil, because any kind of collectivism is evil, which is also probably an unpopular opinion. But how do we focus on that specifically? Because racism isn't going to change. It's over time. We are where we're at
Yes.
because of time. And because
Yes.
of very slow moving processes, because society is not like you can change your mind. Any one person can change their mind. For society as a whole to change their mind, it's going to take generations.
Yes.
And
And
I want to put us on a better path so that in 100 years from now, when we're having this conversation about what the past was, that everybody's in a better place, a more equitable place, a more free place that is just generally better for everyone.
I had something to say and then I totally forgot.
And Mary, to your point, I mean, I imagine that yes, that when you see silent agreement, I'm not sure what the appropriate venue for that is. We'll find out, because I may be taking adventure here to the south. Well, I mean, it shouldn't take 100 years. I mean, you could say shouldn't, but I
Yeah. Again,
it's just
and again,
it's
this is what I think.
volumes.
Nobody, we see one perspective. You are trying to speak to people like that speak a foreign language. So you were trying to speak to racists like it shouldn't take you 100 years and la 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 la, and you shouldn't act out aggressions and violence. Like hurt people hurt people. So the best way to determine why people are hurting people is to find out what their hurt is.
Yeah,
Is that are
is
you
to
willing to
talk to
have those
people. Yeah.
conversations? Are you willing to talk about the hurt that is causing people to hurt people? A lot of times you say, no, I don't care about their hurt. Look what they're doing to other people. But what if that's the answer? But what if looking at those people's hurt is the answer to solve things, but you don't want to look at it because you say, forget them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because their opinion is not relevant, which I get,
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's another perspective to see.
Well, and to her point, things that shouldn't take 100 years are change in policy and law. Those are things that should not take 100
Yes.
years. I mean, they're going to, because they follow, and the way that we are governed, governance follows. So it will take time, but that 100% should not take 100
Agreed.
years. But I mean, it's going to be awful. It's going to be really awful. Um, but the fact, if we look back, we have to look at trajectories, right? To assess where we're going to be in the future, we have to start at where we started and how we've moved forward. And if anybody says that we're devolving, I think is that would be a disingenuous argument from jump.
Agreed. Agreed.
And I think that, I mean, it's helpful to keep that perspective, for that very reason, is that, oh, if we say that in 100 years we're going to live in a utopia, that's not good enough, then what option do we have? We're all fucked.
True.
And we should all turn on each other anyway.
Yeah. Which I oh yeah, there's only two options, guys, when the shit hits the fan. Is like whoever has the biggest guns wins, or we're like freaking full out Woodstock. And I vote Woodstock. I don't know why those are the only two options in my head. Don't argue it. Just go with it.
It's such a complicated argument that I can't process it quickly enough to address it.
And Mary says that she sat with people who bragged about having papers that owned slaves and never talked to them again. But isn't that's not saying anything?
Yeah, but also,
You know what I mean?
well, that's true. And if those people never committed acts of aggression against anyone, then where does that put them? They're people that need to be
Yeah.
convinced, but they're not inherently evil necessarily. They're not committing, like it's complicated.
It's been passed down. You mean they're not yeah, but they're actually they're creating a division
Well, internally.
wherever they go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you believe in energy,
Well, and it's the same reason we bring guests on the show, because
Yeah.
especially, I mean, we see this in anybody who doesn't see this hasn't been watching, but we risk we have this very serious risk of being an echo chamber here between you and I, because we have the same biases and stuff, and this is the things that people suffer from, and it's specifically the reason I go out of my way to have friends who I disagree with. I
Yeah.
have friends I disagree with fundamentally on gun control, immigration, everything, just basically everything. And it's important to have, so you can have those conversations where if you're not sure about something, talk to somebody, as opposed to getting in the middle of a hateful echo chamber, because it doesn't benefit anybody.
which we are not a hateful echo chamber, I don't
Not
think.
hateful, but we have that risk of the echo
We're
chamber business.
yeah, we are a neutral echo chamber, I think.
Yeah, like we don't take any action. We just sit here and talk about shit. We're just
That's our
useless.
job. We'll have different views on. They are coming. Oh,
Open dialogue is key. One point to consider, although, if you haven't experienced racism yourself, try not to downplay someone else's experience with it or say it isn't a big issue. No, I agree 100%. And that's part of being outside of that echo chamber.
yeah, and I don't think that I personally, I guess I can't speak for Aaron. Racism is 100% a big issue. 100%. I have never said that it is not. I think it's more how it's being addressed. You know
Whatever,
what I mean?
Mo. We know you're attacking. It's fine.
Did you see we got 100 messages on Restream chat.
Yeah. So
We got a little award. It's gold. It looks like a trophy.
So I think it's important to separate two thoughts. Looking back to past and present at racism, and looking at how to move forward. And I don't necessarily believe that those two things can be addressed the same way, because and we'll get into this we're going to do a war on poverty episode eventually, where I'll get into my real thoughts on moving forward through all of this, and how I believe that the way that we approach things right now is all out wrong,
oh yeah.
and it's not helpful to the real cause of ending all of this as quickly as possible. The 100 years
Yeah.
thing, I will admit, is, I mean, I'm not a historian, so that
You're
100
not
years is just a number.
Nostradamus?
Yeah, I'm Nostradamus. That's what I like to call myself.
No,
I'm
No,
Nostradamus, though that might be offensive too. So we'll address that as it comes. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I know you have some thoughts on that too, as far as poverty and things that we can address to address
yes,
the real issues from a governance perspective, because
yes,
there
the
are real
cycle of
issues.
poverty.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think we covered everything on the list, which is rare.
I Well, I don't really have a list, so it's Aaron's list, so I'm gonna say yes. I have nothing.
Yeah. But if you know of a community around you that's being oppressed, march for them. It doesn't matter who it is. It shouldn't matter who it is. Just go march. We should all be in the streets constantly, because fundamentally government's the enemy.
Are we ending on that?
No. No, we haven't even talked about the red buttons and stuff.
Yeah, but it's 8:07.
Yeah, so we're gonna get to the red buttons. Thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate all of your input. It definitely makes it more interesting and kind of pulls us out of our isolated white
Yes.
vegan views. Which, by the way, I go with vegan. Being from Las Vegas, we're Las Vegans.
Oh, I was like, where'd vegan come from? Because also I'm changing my vegan diet, people.
Oh,
Just
you're
a
going back to
tidbit.
meat?
Fish and non pork, no pork or cow. But I think I'm like dying a slow death because I'm exhausted and
I don't want to ruin this
yeah.
for you. We're all dying a slow death. It's the thing we all have to come to terms with. But so please like, subscribe, hit the bell. Get your friends in here so we can have more perspectives. Because we
And if
want
you
to have
know
more than
anyone in
that. Go ahead.
if you know anyone in a community that can share their views and help us balance this ish, let us know.
Yeah, we'd love to.
Welcome to
We'd love to have people who vehemently disagree with us.
well,
There's
or
nothing.
can share a different perspective.
Well,
You don't have to vehemently
well,
disagree.
that's I mean that's the nature of it, right? That's how you break
Well, both. I'm just saying
preconceptions.
both.
Breaking
Both is fine.
requires some kind of force, right?
Disagreement.
Oh, damn it, Steven. Steven says we should
Steven
be on
says
Twitch.
we
We're
should
gonna,
be on Twitch. That just came up the other day.
and he probably said it because I told him.
Uh,
So it might
Apparently
happen.
Twitch is
It's
just games and boobs.
yeah. One's in the chat if anybody disagrees. You ready for the crickets?
Oh no,
Oh my god.
Mary just triggered the F out of me. No, we cannot debate the pronunciation of Nevada because there is no debate. It is Nevada. Yes, I'm aware it is a Spanish word and therefore should be pronounced Nevada, but I don't care because it is Nevada. The end. Whole podcast done. Boom.
Well done, Mary. Solid derailing. Uh, I don't think we're sure here on what's gonna happen next week.
No, we're trying to get the peeps.
Yeah. I still want to have that. I still want to get that guest for doing, prescription meds, or
Yeah.
the pharmaceutical process. I
She
just saw
didn't
that
message.
email. I know. I saw that. But all right. Thanks you guys for hanging out. Come hang out next week, and in the meantime, have meaningful conversations.